Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 3, hoping to get to 4. I know Robert's time is limited, so we'll get as many as we can. We are trying to plant these. This is part 3 of our ongoing initial talks with Southern California's premier investor guy and notable speaker. Available for speaking. He loves speaking. He loves it. So do I. It's our whole thing. Robert Fregoso. How are you, Robert?
I'm doing well. Having fun doing these.
How do people get a hold of you? I like doing that at the top.
Best way is probably just to text message me at 949-572-4468. That's by far probably the easiest. I tend to clear that all out by the end of the day. You can also email me at robertfregosojr@gmail.com. Is I would say the next best way.
There you go. Okay. I've been dying to do this since we have literally discussed doing a podcast forever. You did something groundbreaking with one of your previous companies, and I don't know if we're allowed to mention or not mention, but you were an investor guy, and you literally went out and cultivated an entire real estate agent database. And I don't think investors do this enough. You actually saw the niche between putting agents, investors, and money all together, and you were networking and doing it. I got to be honest. Everybody's going to say, oh, yeah, I know about that. Robert's been doing it literally for years and doing it exceptionally well. Where did you start with that idea? How did you do that idea? How did you expand that idea? What did you do to cultivate your current agent database? Because let's be honest, they're the ones out there on the streets.
Well, so it's interesting. So we kind of came across it organically initially. We were trying to figure out ways that we can have an outreach program so that we can get more loans into the company. And so we were financing investors who buy fix and flip properties. And we were looking to expand that. We were also trustee sale buyers and buying properties, both on the MLS, off the MLS, or off market, and at the trustee sale, and looking for ways to work with more agents to scale that in a larger way without necessarily creating all of the in-house overhead. And one of the best ways was, working with real estate agents. Now, I had gotten started, with working with investors, and it was a volume business, so I recognized very early on that if you were in real estate and you wanted to work, a volume, rather than have a large team or do the things that if you worked with investors who they themselves were doing a volume, a volume or a percentage of that volume would transfer to your business. So I started teaching real estate agents how to work with investors. Most of them were doing it incorrectly. Many of them still do it incorrectly. And basically go for the ask of the listing right away, which turns off investors rather than add value. So my entire business, kind of mindset has always been, how do we add value to each other? It's a win-win, just like any relationship, whether it's personal or business. If there's a value add, that business relationship continues or that personal relationship continues. If there's no added value, it's going to fizzle out and die at some point. And so, if you're looking at from a business, let's call it prospecting standpoint, if you're just going out and prospecting and asking for listings, that's a taker, right? You got to figure out how can you be a giver, right? And so people want to work with givers because, who doesn't like getting gifts, right? And so it's the same thing in business. Is if you have someone that you're looking to do business with, figure out how you can fit into their business model and you add value, and I guarantee you'll end up doing business with that person. If you're just sitting there trying to be, the salesperson that's kind of you've gone to these sales seminars and how to master sales and how to close sales and how to do this, if you listen to the underlying notes on most of them is that you have to figure out how you're adding value amongst your competition. And those sales techniques, are basically maybe a little bit harder closing and wording. And while that's all important, the underlying basis is, can you add more value than the next guy? That's really the bottom line. And so we had figured out how to do that.
So was there, you and I both know because we've been doing it that long, how was there pushback to the stigma of the, for agents, if you're listening, sorry, cover your ears. Investors see all agents as deal killers, right? How do you get around that stigma and put these parties together?
Well, now it's really simple because what's happening is here. If you're a real estate agent, you're basically under fire and the commissions are getting compressed.
Right.
Largely because of technology. And I know there's a lot of agents who bury their head in the sand. They're like, no, it's all
No,
about
no,
value.
no. It's all about
You can
value.
get six,
Right, right, right,
you
right.
can get 6%. You can get 6%. You just have to know, hold your ground, hold your ground. Yeah, hold your ground until the next guy who just has the same track record as you,
Yeah,
and he says, I'll do it for 1%. Right?
that's
Hold your
correct.
ground
I
till you're
keep
broke.
quoting to everyone. The top agents who everybody hated 5 years ago were all doing 1% first. Steve Hawks, David Bartel's our friend. If you look at the top of the top, they're all doing a discounted sales front end to make all the money on the back end. And that model held up. I mean, that model, these guys were all ahead of the curve. But yeah, completely. I'm a guy who spends my day doing marketing, right? For real estate agents and investors to get leads. And it shocks me that they get stuck on weird numbers, right? Like they get stuck on, if I don't make this, I'm not going to do it. If I don't get this, I'm not.
Right.
I assume, and the reason I bring this up, we're going to go on a tangent. I realize that's about to happen because we're both ADD. My whole pitch when I'm coaching or doing leads or working with people, I tell them the business of doing that work will ultimately lead you to more deals. It's not about the 1%. It's not about it's always about being in it and doing it. And you've been doing it for a long time. Like I would just assume by osmosis at this point, agents just call you.
Probably. I don't know that much, but I definitely get, I think, a lot of calls. I think, part of it's reputation. The other part is that word gets around. The sharp agents kind of look up and see who is part of a transaction, and then, you get calls that way. With respect to the agents that are, let's say, trying to get, deals and trying to get their 6%, this is kind of my favorite niche right now is that, if you have a seller, right,
Right.
that's out there and they've got a property that is going to be undersold or maybe sold for its value as a fixer, but it needs a lot of work. If you bring those deals, perhaps rather than you just make the commission, we can profit split on the deal, and we'll fix it up, or you can fix it up if that's what you're looking to do, and we'll put up all the money, and then you make more than your 6%. So I would implore, especially today in this kind of environment, that agents don't look at themselves as a salesperson, rather look at themselves as an entrepreneur and spot opportunity. And so, look at what you might be passing on. So even if you're going to just sell this to another investor, many times when you're in the process of trying to get a listing or before you've even listed the property, is if you simply, because what happens is, and a lot of agents haven't figured this out, is there's a lot of baby boomers and silent generation that, the outside of the house looks pretty decent and the inside looks like crap. And what they underestimate is the embarrassment that they don't want their neighbors coming through an open house. And guess what? First open house, it's all neighbors, right? It's neighbors and the first time buyers or the buyers that are actively looking. They're going to walk through that house first. And, and many times it's a fear of like, wow, my neighbors are going to see that I've been really living in more, I don't know if you want to quite call it impoverished, situation, but, where the house is really terrible on the inside. And, the people, they have their reputation to kind of hold up to, or what they perceive to be their reputation. So, many times that alone will drive a seller to want to sell it off market. And so if you're an agent and you're not offering this you know, iBuyer option, right? This cash buyer option to them, you know, you're probably missing out on some listings because that hasn't been an option for you. And they might be embarrassed to tell you that. And the next agent might. So, you know, that opens the door to conversation. You know, there's other times where we've just partnered with the seller and we've helped them just flip their own house and made some money there. And we, you know, we do the design or the work product or whatever it is and help them make more money. And sometimes that helps the agent get more money or get the listing or get a full commission listing or, you know, even in some cases, even participate in the profit there. So it just depends on, you know, how you're looking at the real estate market. I mean, I think that you have to look at your business as a business and not as a, hey, I'm a salesperson job and I'm going to go out and sell and I'm going to use this closing technique to show them why I'm worth 6%. Where the next guy is saying, yeah, I'll do that and then more. And you don't have to pay me anything. There's no commission if we don't make you extra money. You know, you're going to probably lose to that pretty frequently.
Okay, while we're on the topic, are you still, before we talk about the mechanics of the importance of investors working with agents and how to cultivate that database, we'll get to that. Everyone hang tight. Are you still shocked that agents aren't cultivating a list of investors to buy right out of the gate?
You know, I think usually what happens is this, is that you meet someone who performs and that's your go-to guy until he doesn't, and then you're searching for someone else, right?
Instead of spreading the bread evenly. Yeah, I agree.
Right,
I agree.
Right. And part of it is that, you know, listen, investors are a pretty savvy bunch, so they're going to try to be the go-to guy, just like I would love to be your go-to guy. You know, call me first, and you know, I'm going to give you a quick yes or a quick no. And that's really what most agents want. And if I'm a no, they're going to go to the next guy.
Right.
And so, you know, which is fine, you know, because you're not going to agree on numbers on every single deal, and that's okay. Most real estate agents understand that. You know, they don't expect the one guy to take everything. But you know, you should have a few investors to work with, and you should figure out how you fit into that model that best suits them and you and the seller all at the same time, because that's the formula for having a long-term relationship.
Yeah, I completely agree. So how important is an agent database? And how is it worth it for me to do a mixer like you did? You've done millions of them at this point. How important is it to create mixers and environment, putting agents together, getting a list for myself so that they know to bring a deal to me?
So here's the secret sauce, right? It's not just inviting real estate agents, right? That's not the thing, right? Because many of them just aren't going to go. It's trying to cultivate relationships and finding either a networking event or an educational event that you think might benefit them, setting up meetings that might benefit them so that you can be in the mix, right? So but you're also not doing this with just any real estate agent. What you're doing is you're searching out the agents that are already working with other investors and trying to add more value than the other investors that they're working with. And so, you know, those are the ones that you're really going to target. So if you're an investor and you want to get more deals other than marketing yourself, meaning other than yourself just sending out flyers or mailers or Facebook ads and you know, all the other types of ads that you can do, you know, you can utilize and leverage the work product out of a lot of these, you know, salespeople that are out there, that this is their core business, is to go out and find listings, and you know, a percentage of those listings are going to work for you, is to network with them. And so you can hone down your list by finding the agents that are, you know, perhaps maybe working the, you know, people that have lived in the house for over 30 years or whatever it is that they're working, that might have a higher percentage of fixers that call them because of the type of, you know, marketing that they're gearing towards. So the way to do that is really to go through the MLS. And listen, if you're an investor and you don't have access to the MLS, I'm just going to say shame on you, because that's a tool of the trade.
That's
And
literally the only thing you're good for.
right. And so, and I've heard the arguments that, listen, you can get all the comps and everything else from Redfin because they're all brokers and they're pretty live information. And that's true to a certain extent, except that there is a button in the MLS where you can opt out. So you're going to miss those. The other thing is that you don't get the agent notes. And the third thing is that you don't get all of the agent contact information for that particular listing or that sales. If in the case of like Zillow, I know that says in a listing provided by, but in the case of Redfin, where they're an actual brokerage, they don't have to put that. So if you look at the search abilities that you have on the MLS, it far exceeds what you can do on the public websites, and the information that you get is much, much better. Now, with that, if you, let's say, search for, homes that sold for the highest price per square foot in a certain area, and then had parameters for whatever area that you're working, you're going to get a kind of a small list of agents that have both either sold those houses or were the listing agent that sold it to the investor and backtrack. And so those are the agents that you kind of want to work with initially, because they're already finding the type of deals that you want. And the entry phone call to them is quite simple. It's really just as simple as saying, hey, I noticed that you sold this house over here to, it looks like an investor. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Do you have anything else coming up? Or, what can I do to be the next phone call for that? And then start to build up that relationship. Take notes on what they like, what they don't like, if they're short, with personality, things along these lines, because it'll help you tailor your marketing to them. And so you shouldn't be sending one, let's say text message group text to everybody who has maybe different personalities. You should tailor it to what they like. If they mention in the conversation that they've got a kid and maybe they're the baseball coach, then that's something that you can bring up in your next conversation if you're taking notes well. So all of these little things come into play. Now, with reference to what Lee first mentioned, was I did a lot of mixers. A lot of people, they go to mixers and they do this networking to get to meet a lot of people. And what they do is they walk around and they're like a card collector. They're handing out cards, they're collecting cards, and they think like, wow, that was a successful event because I met 55 people because this is how many business cards I ended up with at the end of the night. Right. The reality is that you're not going to remember all those people. They're not going to remember you. And the way that I did it is that we would invite a lot of people to the event. So when the few that showed up that we'd invited out of the hundreds and hundreds we would invite, they were there looking for us, because here's what happens. They're already there looking to do business with you, and now it's yours to screw up. And then while they're there, what you're doing is you're solidifying the relationship by having a good time. And so your goal there is not to sell them. They've essentially been sold by showing up. And your job there is to connect. And so that's I think where most people go wrong, is that they don't focus on the connection. They focus on the volume.
Contact information.
All right. Well, best is probably text message. Again, it's 949-572-4468. And secondary would be email, Robert Fragoso Jr., and Jr. is just JR. It's at gmail.com.